White and Sleeping Beauty and Cinderella and most of the early princesses, the mom is out of the picture. And I suppose that makes sense, because if mom is in the picture, there's no conflict because we tend to come in and protect our children. But when you've got the wicked stepmother or whatever, that's where you get these great, interesting movies. Well, tonight, as you maybe can see behind me, the cruise is offering Mulan, which I think is a terrific recent version of a princess, because Mulan obviously is a much more self-actualized and heroic example of a young woman. She's not just out there trying to find her true love's kiss, but she's in fact trying to do something wonderful for her father and to honor her ancestors, and a very different quality. But this recent movie, Brave, created an interesting conversation down in the hot tub today, because almost none of the moms that I spoke to really loved the movie. And I think that their big issue was that the conflict between the mother and the daughter was not rooted in something that felt honest to them in terms of their protectiveness of their own daughters. So today I thought we would do, or this evening I thought we would do a little training about the archetypes, not just in Disney movies, but in other movies in general. The archetype of the mother very often is split between a good version of a mother and a bad or evil version of a mother. A very common example of this can be seen, for example, in The Wizard of Oz. We have the good witch, and then of course we have the bad witch. When we think about the evil sorts of female characters that populate so many of these wonderful Disney movies, a lot of times it is a dark or sinister. I think of Tangled, for example. The girl in Tangled doesn't realize that the woman she thinks is her mother is actually not her mother at all, but is somebody who kidnapped her in order to sort of exploit her for the magical properties of her long, luxurious hair. So archetypes are an important key piece to be thinking about as you look to raise your grades, as you look to maximize points with your English teachers. The human psyche was really beautifully analyzed by Joseph Campbell, one of my favorite authors. So if you're familiar with Joseph Campbell, you'll know that his Hero of a Thousand Faces and his description of the hero's journey makes very clear that there really are a finite number of archetypes that we can see in most literature. And a lot of these have ancient sort of antecedents going all the way back historically. Sometimes all the way back to the ancient Greeks and even earlier. So the idea of archetype probably comes to bear in some of your favorite literature. A lot of young people I know this last year really enjoyed the Hunger Games trilogy. Well, what is the archetype that is taking place there? It's interesting because if you think about it, Brave had the girl who does archery, and then we had Katniss in the Hunger Games trilogy, who also is an archer. It seemed like the year for archery. All of a sudden, all the Hollywood studios are coming out with movies where we've got archers. I think one of the Avengers also was an archery guy, wasn't he? I think so. So anyway, the idea of the way these archetypes sort of play out in literature is going to help you understand that you're never just looking at one story. All stories exist in conversation with universal archetypes and in conversation with other stories that should be familiar to you. We've talked in other lessons about the common types of allusions that we see in the Bible, in mythology, and also in Shakespeare. So very often you're seeing allusions to things that you're supposed to know about, especially by the time you're in 11th or 12th grade. So I hope that you've taken the time to read from all of those texts and all of those resources. Edith Hamilton's Mythology is an excellent resource to orient yourself if you need to start more basically. A lot of students begin cutting their teeth on the Greek mythology with D'Aulaire's. That's D''Aulaire''S. Dolaire's book, it's actually kind of like a big coloring book. It's about yay big, orange and yellow cover, and it will introduce you to things that you can then translate into the Edith Hamilton, which is much denser, more on a upper high school and early college level. Certainly you need to be familiar with both Old and New Testaments, because archetypally there are saviors in all kinds of stories. Certainly you're probably familiar with the story of Jesus Christ. Well, whether you are a Christian or not doesn't excuse you from needing to understand archetypally who Christ was, not just historically, and also as, you know, someone who many believe is the Son of God, come to die for the sins of mankind. You need to understand that when you see water being used in specific ways in your literature, that might be an allusion to baptism. You need to know what baptism is. You need to know about Noah's Ark, the fall of man in the Garden of Eden. Certainly there are stories throughout both Old and New Testament that are going to be very relevant to you. And finally, Shakespeare. Please make sure that you've identified not just the sonnets that they have you read in your little, 10th grade class or whatever, but take the time, do some personal research if your teachers have not given you enough Shakespeare to really orient you in the land of what most educated people would consider to be standard. You should be very comfortable and familiar with at least 2 or 3 texts of Shakespeare from each of the 3 major Shakespearean categories. You should know at least a couple of the comedies. So maybe you're very comfortable with A Midsummer Night's Dream, certainly one of my favorites. You may also know some of the tragedies. These are more commonly taught in high school. I'm not sure why, but the most common texts I've seen in my 20 years or so of classroom teaching are Romeo and Juliet on the 9th grade level, followed by Julius Caesar on the 10th grade level, and very often King Lear or Macbeth following that. So we basically have all these plays with like dead bodies on the stage at the end. And unfortunately what we lose are the historical plays and also the comedies. So I would love you to be familiar with Richard III. Now is the winter of our discontent. This is a very important historical play, as well as some of these other comedies and the tragedies with which you probably are already more familiar. So archetypes. Archetypes are everything when it comes to understanding and analyzing literature, and when it comes to being a strong writer and having a strong voice. I would put it to you this way: if you think that you're interested in writing as a career of any sort, and you're not already immersing yourself in these types of texts that we're talking about, and you don't understand Joseph Campbell, please get yourself a copy of the Joseph Campbell books that I've mentioned here, and orient yourself in what has already been created so beautifully and excellently. When we know what already has been invented, we don't try to invent the wheel. We honor the wheel that's already rolling very well, thank you very much, and we try to find ways to bring our own experience to bear on what has already been created. It's a wonderful privilege to be a part of that journey. So archetypes are very important. I want you to spend time thinking about 5 of your favorite stories. In fact, I challenge you at the end of this micro-training, write down your 5 favorite movies or books or plays that you've studied or read, or maybe just something you've seen in a movie theater. Maybe it's Iron Man, maybe it's something simple, but hopefully you've got some others that are more canonized literature from school. And think about what are some of the archetypes that appear in those stories. Archetypes. Food for thought if you want to raise those grades and be a strong student in English literature.